Hello, and welcome to Awaken, where we share insights to the connection between science and spirituality for self discovery, joy, and freedom. I am your host and spiritual coach, Stephanie Rouch, and it is my absolute pleasure today to be here with Maxim Jago. Did I say that right? Because we practiced that weeks. Okay, great. So, Maxim is a consultant, futurist, award winning filmmaker, best selling author, international keynote, Royal Society for the Arts Fellow, UN speaker, South by Southwest advisor, Oxford University and BBC Oxco advisor, and the founder of the Creativity Conference, which you're going to be hearing more about. And he has consulted on future and emerging technologies, communications, and education for a wide range of organizations, and has spoken on subjects like AI and the future of human experience around the world, including for the United Nations. Such a pleasure to have you here, Maxim. Thank you for coming and tell us about yourself.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for inviting me to chat with you today. I think that the best way to frame the ideas I'd like to share with you is to start with something that happened when I was about 3 years old. We had a spinning top when I was 3. It's one of these things that you press the plunger at the top and it spins around and it goes woo. And I remember at 3 working out how it worked. You know, there was this moment of realization. Okay, so you press the thing in the top, it goes woo, and there's a limit to how fast you can make it go because there's a spiral on the metal and you can only push it down so fast anyway. And then okay, I get it. I get how this works. And I had this moment of realization, of lucidity that, wow, this whole world must be full of things that do things. And I want to know how they all work. And that mission, that curiosity has taken me through a lot of occupations, a lot of roles, a lot of exploration. And although I don't usually mention it on mic, as it were, when I'm giving keynotes, particularly when I'm talking about future and emerging technology, or even education, I really went for it with my spiritual exploration. I didn't want to live a spiritual life in particular, but I wanted to understand how the universe works. I'm just a fan of it. I'm a fan of existing and being alive and having a single point of view and eating and smelling and touching and seeing and experiencing and learning and growing. I just think it's phenomenal. So I studied a lot of different spiritual paths along the way to try to understand what is this thing called life. And I don't think I mentioned in the bio there, you know, I condensed about 30 years of that study into a philosophy book I'm going to publish shortly. It's a practical philosophy book in plain English. It's called How to Be. Starts off with how you know you exist at all and how you recognize yourself, and then gradually builds up to identifying a life purpose that you can attach to. As we were speaking a little bit earlier on today about the difference between choosing to live a life of service and being in servitude, and the difference between the two.
Great. Well, it's just such a pleasure to have you because you do have this expertise in creativity and futurism and AI. And as you said, this spiritual exploration has been something that's been a constant for you, but hasn't been what has made it to the stage as much. And yet it seems like the thread of spirituality exists in all those topics. And I would love to hear from you. How do you reconcile futurism and AI with your spiritual exploration?
That's a great question. You know, our mutual friend, Anna Yusim, who connected us, who's just a stellar human being, mentioned years ago that she discovered in her practice as a psychiatrist that unless she incorporated a spiritual component into the advice she gave to her clients, it never really seemed to be impactful. It's my understanding that one's spiritual outlook is the lens through which one encounters one's own life. It is the framework, it's the paradigm, it's the landscape upon which all of your experiences take place. So you probably should get that nice and clear. You should probably work it out. You should probably make it intentional. Now, I don't think it matters all that much, frankly, if a person's worldview is pure mechanistic universe, four laws of thermodynamics, maybe there's a fifth with atomic entropy, but essentially it's all causal universe, cause and effect, physics, gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, all of those fundamental levers that move things in the universe. I heard a theory that complex life may be an inevitable emergent characteristic in matter simply because energy flow, heat, that sort of thing tends to come into channels and groups, and matter tends to coagulate into like groups. So you start to get more and more complex structures inevitably anyway. And then who knows, what we think of as consciousness may just be an emergent characteristic of matter. So it could be that your outlook is purely mechanistic universe. Fine. It could be that you have a religious faith. It could be that you like to align with a particular spiritual paradigm. And whatever that is the lens through which you experience your life. That is the framework with which you structure the narrative of your life. And I think in a very literal sense, we know ourselves and others as stories. Your memories are the fabric of the story of you. But the way the story is written will always be according to the terms of your spiritual outlook. And so I think it's not a question of whether it's avoidable or not. Your spiritual outlook is it's the medium of your experience. And so inevitably that feeds into my presentations about, we're looking now at artificial general intelligence, we're looking at artificial superintelligence. I've been promoting the concept of functional artificial intelligence. It doesn't actually have to be self-aware for it to feel for us like it's self-aware. It's functionally able and flexible, and it can be useful for us and helpful in actually lots of different ways. It can be a mirror for us even. And there's all sorts of psychoanalytic benefits and so on. All of that emerges from your spiritual outlook. So I don't think it's necessary to force it in. I don't think it's necessary to push your spiritual beliefs into your day-to-day communication. It's already intrinsically there. And interestingly, my understanding of the origin of the concept of a religion is that it's the communal practice of shared spiritual belief. And what's interesting about that working definition is that it's the communal practice of shared, as in already shared. People already happen to have the same basic spiritual beliefs, and they choose to practice those spiritual beliefs communally. So it's collective practice of those spiritual beliefs rather than operating in isolation as individuals. I've heard of at least one mystic encouraging people to explore spirituality in groups, just like explorers climbing the sacred mountain that are roped together. So if somebody falls off the path, the others in the group can say, hold on, I've got you, and pull you back into truth. But equally, it only takes one person in the group to find the path and say, hey, wait a second, I think that's the way up the next outcropping of rocks. And everyone can see the intrinsic truth in what they're saying. So collective exploration of spiritual matters is very helpful. And of course, in time, what we think of as religion came to mean organized religion, which is a very particular kind of religion, which has a socio-political function as well as a spiritual one. People often mix the words up. But I suppose the short answer to your question is that, there's this old line that we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. If you run with that idea, there is no aspect of our lives that is not spiritual. And as I always forget his full name, Sadhguru, is hilarious. As he often says, everyone experiences trauma, everyone. The question is, afterwards, do you spend the rest of your life saying, I'm wounded, I can't do anything with my life, look at my wounds, don't expect anything of me, I'm freed from the burden of success? Or do you become wise Do you learn from the experience and grow? Because suffering always brings gifts. And the difference between those two is an internal choice. And that suffering is rarely spiritual. It's very rare that people confront the forces of evil in a magical circle. I mean, maybe it happens all the time, but in my experience with the people I've met, pretty rare. The suffering that people experience is emotional, it's interacting with people, it's physical harm. You could be assaulted, you could be attacked emotionally as well as physically, you could have a fall, you could have an accident. Suffering takes a lot of material forms. It's your internal response to that suffering that leads to either a benign positive growth or a weighing down that can prevent that growth. But it's existence itself.
There's so many directions we could go from here because I want to dive deeper into that. And right now, before we do, I'm curious your perception on like you're talking about this benefit of collective action, of exploring truth together. And I'm wondering if you can speak to people who may have come from religion, maybe feel a little bit of distrust with their religion of origin, and so feel that same distrust with any spiritual exploration in groups, but are yearning for it. And I'm wondering if you can speak to those people and perhaps give a perspective of a way they could approach this collective spiritual exploration.
Yeah. Trust is just an absolutely enormous topic.
Mhm.
And we throw the idea around so casually. Looking at our future as a species in terms of our socioeconomic landscape, we're now fast moving towards what they call a trustless society. A trustless society is one in which trust is unnecessary. And counterintuitively, the outcome is that you can trust.
Mhm.
So economically, a good example is credit cards. If you pay for something with a credit card, I'm not a financial advisor. Do not take this as financial advice. But my understanding is that you get something like 90 days to just tell the credit card company you're not happy, you didn't receive the goods, whatever. They will immediately take the money from the merchant's account. And then the merchant has to prove that you were happy, you did receive the goods. And if they can't prove it, you just get the money. So that's an example of a trustless payment system. They had to implement that originally, or nobody would feel safe using a piece of plastic instead of cash. So there's protections in place. I think that there was a mystic I studied with years ago who used to say that if you give somebody false hope, if there is such a thing as sin, if we want to explore the concept of sin, choosing to give somebody false hope must be sinful. Because when somebody has hope and then they discover that it was misplaced, they lose faith in their judgment.
Mm.
Now, the word judgment has two meanings. We use it to mean approval or disapproval, and we use it to mean discernment.
Mhm.
Now, judgment as a form of approval or disapproval is pretty useless in most contexts. It's a small number of situations, like if you're someone's mentor or if you're judging a competition. There are a small number of cases where value judgment has value, has purpose, but most of the time it's destructive. And we should just frankly put it out in the cold and get on with our lives and get focus on discernment and appreciation. But if you have false hope, it means that you can no longer trust your own discernment. You can no longer trust,
Hmm.
which means that you can't make any decisions in your life and feel confident that you will keep yourself safe,
Mhm.
that the choices you make will lead to positive outcomes for yourself and others. This is a wicked thing to do to somebody because it applies across the board for your entire life. It applies right down to what you're going to have for lunch. And it certainly applies to things like relationships. It certainly applies to things like spiritual inquiry. Now, in organized religions, the major ones, all of them place a great deal of emphasis on faith. So belief is what you believe to be true on the basis of the available evidence. Faith is belief in the absence of evidence. And it's easy to brush that off and say, oh, that's just doesn't make any sense rationally, so we should discard it. But I think what they're really alluding to is a different type of thinking. We tend to think according to our rational faculties, our deductive reasoning faculties. But all the evidence suggests that that part of the mind is like a pocket calculator compared to the total mind, the whole mind. I like to refer to the non-conscious mind rather than the unconscious or the subconscious, because I don't like to limit the definition. So all the stuff that we're not immediately aware of and cognizant of, that is the real you. I've just written a book actually about teaching, and I'm about to publish that encourages teaching to the non-conscious mind, which is the real mind, rather than the conscious mind. So it's direct access to the real being and using the thought patterns that work best for that, seem to work best for that part of the mind. But when it comes to faith and spirituality, we find ourselves in this really major problem, right? I said earlier that your spiritual paradigm is it's the glass through which you perceive your reality. It is the lens, it is the landscape itself, it is the foundation of your experience. It's the frame within which you see your picture of the world. And if you invest heavily in any spiritual path and then discover, for whatever reason, that your hope, your faith was misplaced, well, now how can you trust your discernment for any future spiritual inquiry? You can't. And ultimately, you can never know whether anything that you do or any choice that you make will lead to the outcomes that you hope for. And I think the key to restore that trust, because I went through my own, shadow of the valley when it comes to trust and faith and belief. I think the key is to be very honest with yourself, really stringently honest, and admit to yourself that every step of the way you knew that you did not know. You knew that you merely hoped it would be good and that it would be wholesome and that the outcomes would be positive and that the actions you took in the spirit of that venture would have a good impact on the world. You merely hoped that that would turn out to be true, but you knew that there was always a roll of the dice. There was always the risk. You can't possibly have enough information ever to know that every choice you make is right. It's impossible. Forget it. It's not how the universe works. It's not how our brains work. It's not how our minds work. You can't. You could spend a full year describing the room you're in now and fail to describe it in complete detail. Good luck describing every relationship you have, everything you've learned, everywhere you've been, how culture works, how bank accounts work. Forget it. That's not the deal. That's not what you're being asked to do. If you're realistic in recognizing that there were risks and you knew what those risks were, and you took that chance with every step of your journey, it means that you can now trust your discernment. Unfortunately, if you've had bad experiences in a particular religious practice or spiritual practice or work practice, career, relationships, whatever, they don't always go well, and it can lead to extraordinarily deep suffering. But if you look back to the key turning points where you stepped into that experience, if you're honest with yourself, you will acknowledge, I think, that you did know that there were risks. You did. You did. And that means that you can trust your discernment in the future. So to take your example, somebody who often what happens is people grow up in a family that has a particular faith.
Mhm.
And of course, at an age where you have basic grasp of language, but you don't have your prefrontal cortex doesn't exist yet. It's not grown fully yet. So you don't really have this ease of calculating consequences and outcomes. And if this, then that comes much easier after the age of 25, on average. Of course, I'm generalizing. And so as a very young child, your family's religious practice is tightly bound up in your identity culturally and as a family. People don't differentiate very clearly between their religious practice and their culture. They are different things, and their ethnicity for that matter, and their nation status, their citizenship. Everything's bound up together. And so your religious practice becomes part of your identity. And then if you discover as you get older that in some way the people that taught you that religious practice may not have been very good representatives of that faith. Just
Mhm.
because they say they are, it doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. Just because they wear a special hat and claim to be experts, by no means does that mean they actually know what they're doing. So you might get bad advice, bad guidance. And I'm saying this because I don't want to suggest that there's something intrinsically wrong with religions. There's a lot that's fantastic about religions. It's the practice of the faith that leads to sometimes positive, sometimes negative outcomes. So I don't want to get into, I have no opinion about it. But if you find as you get older and you realize, wait a minute, this doesn't feel true anymore to me, and I'm asking questions and they're not being answered in a way that feels authentic, it can be a crisis of identity because it's so wrapped up in your upbringing, your family life, your culture that you've grown into. It can be very difficult. It can be an existential threat, and all human fears are rooted in unknowns. So anything other than the faith that you've grown up with is an unknown, terrifying. But I think even when it comes to a faith that you've grown up in, could be spirituality. It's such a broad term. I mean, what does it really mean? People these days use the word spirituality, and they sort of, broadly speaking, I think, mean one of perhaps three types of spiritual inquiry, right? Like you've got traditionally Hindu practices. We were talking about chakras earlier, yoga. The word yoga as a way is very broad. Second oldest living culture in the world, pretty powerful stuff. Then you've got, I suppose, some ancient Chinese theories. And then you've got the whole Western esoteric tradition with a mixture of Egyptology and Kabbalism and tarot, all bound up together in 20th century mysticism. These are sort of broad categories when we say the word spirituality. But I want to use the word in a much broader sense, that your spirituality is your spiritual life, and it comes before your material life and is absolutely embedded in it. There is no separation whatsoever. It is your physical life. So when you are faced with this crisis of identity, I think it's helpful to look back and recognize right from the beginning, I didn't know the answers to these questions. And I tried to find the answers to these questions in the faith I grew up in. And I knew that I did not know the answers, right?
Mhm.
I knew that I did not know.
Mhm.
And that is a great place to start. Knowing that you don't know is a great place to start. So it's not that you knew and you forgot, or it's not that you knew and understood and somehow stopped understanding. You recognize that you didn't understand before and you still don't understand. And now you're going to try another way, and you can trust your discernment. Kept yourself safe until now. You're going to keep yourself safe in the future. You need to be able to trust your discernment to step forward into the world, trusting that you will keep yourself safe.
You've talked about so many really key concepts that I think could have light bulb moments for a lot of people listening. Like this idea that we do really want to keep ourselves safe, and that the fear of the unknown might, we may be interpreting that as something we should resist, but it's just that it's unknown. And there's something that you mentioned at the beginning about just being a fan of existing. And I feel like what a lot of us really want is to be able to be present and enjoy our lives. And we put it off thinking, well, I will step into the present moment once I have these things arranged. And it may not even be once I have that outcome, but it's more like I will allow myself to be fully present once everything else is taken care of. And we never really get there. And I'm wondering from your perspective, if you're willing to share your own personal experience that other people can pull through their filter, how do you how do you employ your personal judgment system to be able to discern, okay, I'm safe, okay, I can move forward, I can explore, I can go into the present moment. Like, how do you get your nervous system to and use whatever internal cues to know what direction to take?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share. I think, again, this is an enormous question. And it's not one, it's not a journey that's helped by modern media. During the Second World War, there was a newspaper in the UK that, as an experiment, they published a panic-inducing headline, and they sold something like three times as many copies of the newspaper.
Mm,
And the media's been doing it ever since.
mhm,
The commodity for media, any media, is your attention.
mhm.
You might have heard of the frightened monkey theory. Have you heard of the frightened monkey, the frightened ape? Okay, so there's two monkeys walking through the savannah. They're walking through the long grass, and there's a rustle in the grass, and one of the monkeys shouts, "Tiger!" and jumps. And the other monkey laughs. The second monkey laughs at the first monkey and says, "Don't be ridiculous. It's just a breeze. It's just the wind." Now, there are two outcomes from this scenario. So one scenario is that it's just the breeze, and the two monkeys get to where they're going. And then the second monkey tells all the other monkeys, "You wouldn't believe what happened on the way here. The first monkey is so silly, thought it was a tiger and jumped," and everybody laughs at the first monkey. The second outcome is that it was a tiger, and the monkey who jumped lives
Mhm.
and stays in the gene pool.
Yeah.
And we're evolved from the frightened monkey.
Mm,
So, as a species, we have this powerful predisposition to
mm,
fixate on the threats, the problems, the wrinkles in the cloth. You have
mm,
a tabletop covered in beautiful, smooth cloth with one wrinkle in it.
mm.
You will not be able to avoid staring at that wrinkle. You actually, after a short time, will probably stop even noticing the beautiful swathe of perfectly smooth cloth. You'll fixate on the wrinkle. We're evolved to do this, it seems, and it's a fantastic defense mechanism because it allows us, thanks to the power of our imagination, we can forecast and abstract ideas and think about the future and imagine future threats. So it allows us to play out in our minds. Okay, so if I hear a rustle in the grass when I'm walking, I'm going to jump every time. That's my plan. Okay, so then there's a rustle in the grass and we jump, and so we're prepared for it.
Mhm.
And that preparedness is one of the reasons that humanity has dominated the earth so powerfully. It's not just that we have opposable thumbs, we can plan in the abstract in a way that some animal species seem to be able to do, but we've got it, you know, to the stars, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, what do we do with that? I think Eckhart Tolle puts it so beautifully in his book, The Power of Now. I'd recommend that everybody reads it. And that I'm going to horribly butcher the elegant way that he expresses it now. But the gist of it is that your relationship with the past is mostly constructed memories. Most of our memories are not accurate. And your relationship with the future is all imagined,
Mhm.
and imagined in a way where we have this tendency to fixate on threats, dangers. It's not just that. Anytime there's a gap in your knowledge, it's our nature to fill that gap with the most threatening, worrisome possible explanation. That's why text messages are just terrible for communication. because there's no sentiment, there's no feeling.
Mhm.
So you could say, you know, like if you hadn't seen a friend for a long time and that friend might text you and say, I don't know how I'm going to feel when I see you, you could hear that in your mind's eye as, this is such a powerful experience. I'm so excited to see you. I just don't know. I feel like I'm going to be overwhelmed with joy.
Mhm.
Or you could hear it in your mind as, I don't know if I really want to see you. I don't know how I feel about seeing you. And we will almost certainly choose the negative
Mhm.
explanation
Mhm.
because it prepares us for that threat. With social primates, socialization is literally life and death for us still today. People always say in the past, but no, still today, loneliness literally kills.
Yeah.
And so, what do we really have? We only really have this moment in which we exist. You only really have this moment in which you're actually having an experience and in which you are an actor in the original sense of the word. It's only now and now and now that you exist. And the problem is, as soon as you think about something happening right now, it's already in the past.
Mhm.
So it's a zero time now.
Mhm.
You don't even actually exist in the now because it takes a little bit of time for, like, we're looking at each other through a screen. There's a bit of a lag on the internet, but there's light coming from my computer screen and it's hitting my retina. The retina are actually neuronal cells, and they flex, produce ATP, goes down through a transmission protocol through the optic nerve, hits the visual cortex in about 40 or 50 different forms of visual data, and then gets reformed probably through the thalamus, gets presented and projected into consciousness. There's a time delay.
Mhm.
So you're never even experiencing now at the moment that your existence occurs. So just chill out. just just relax. And I think Eckhart Tolle puts it in. I think he puts it in The Power of Now that if you're honest with yourself in this moment right now, you don't have usually won't have any problems.
Mhm.
Of course, there are exceptions. Like you might be in the air having fallen off a cliff, right? You do have a problem right now if you're in the air falling off a cliff.
Mhm.
But in most cases, when people are wrapped up in their worries, where they're drudging through painful memories that they're reliving in their imagination,
Mhm.
stirring themselves up emotionally, you're literally reliving it. You're punishing yourself by
Mhm.
reliving experiences where you don't have any new opinions or new information or new understanding. You're just looking at it from another angle. It's like trying to get a sofa up the stairs that does not fit, and you just try to change the angle and change the angle. It doesn't fit, and so you keep trying to work your way up through it. It's a fantastic form of therapy, EFT, that seems to be good at triggering the brain's processing of unprocessed emotion. There are other approaches,
Mhm.
but that's the mechanics of emotion, right?
Mhm.
And there's things like making sure you get enough omega-3. You need a lot of omega-3 for your mammalian brain to do its job properly and literally process the molecules that we experience as emotion. There's some mechanical stuff. But if you're choosing, ultimately, all you really get to choose, and I don't believe in individual free will, but if such a thing exists, surely it is in what we choose to focus on. So if you choose to focus on the past and relive and relive and relive the past, that becomes your experience. And if you choose to focus your attention on the imagined future, and I'm not saying don't project manage, right? Like if you're running a company and you've got to work out resources and planning and strategy and abstractly, that's sure. But if you're talking about, for example, I'm going to have a 2 week trip to a place I've never been. Well, once you've worked out the logistics, what really is the benefit in imagining yourself there and wondering if it's going to be safe or if it's going to be okay? And you've done your logistics and planning. If you can choose to focus on here and now, you will tend to be happier and more peaceful, more productive, more alive. You'll tend to generate more memories because you'll be present witnessing your own life. those memories become your story, they become your sense of identity,
Mhm.
you will tend to worry less. You'll tend to have more opportunities for appreciation, which, as the Dalai Lama says, is the path to happiness. So if you can choose as much as possible to focus on the now, I think that's a key to it. For myself, I just did the shadow work.
Yeah.
I just did the work, and I spent so many years thinking about the past and the future. And I just think that, we live in this culture, I think in the US and in the UK and a large part of the world today, there's this belief that we should not experience pain.
Mm.
As soon as you invalidate pain as an experience, you're kind of in trouble because existing is painful.
Mhm.
So what I have a whole chapter on pain in my book. My argument is that pain is the messenger. Pain is not the original cause, and we're evading pain. I mean, if you've got a headache and you take a painkiller, I get it, right? But there's a very good chance you have a headache because you're dehydrated. Maybe it's stress, it's tension in your neck. Maybe people get migraines apparently very often have a tiny microscopic hole in one of the valves of the heart. A little bit of venal blood gets mixed in with the arterial blood flow. And it's like an in and out operation, no more migraines.
Mm.
If you never address the origin of the pain, and the messenger, the pain tells you,
Mhm.
if you never address it, you're just going to keep experiencing that pain. The message is going to keep being sent. So I think it's important for us to incorporate experiencing pain. And by that, obviously, I hope it's obvious, I mean emotional as well as physical. If you incorporate that into your your spiritual landscape, your intellectual landscape, your worldview, your paradigm, and you say, yeah, it's going to hurt sometimes. I'm going to fall off this bike sometimes. I'm going to say things wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear things wrong. How many arguments have we had where you actually just misunderstood what the person was saying? And then 6 hours later, you realize, oh, wait, I thought you used that word. No, 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 no. I used this word. Oh, we totally agree then. There's no conflict at all. If you accept that suffering is not only not necessarily unacceptable, it's not necessarily bad, it's not necessarily to be avoided, that it may be, dare I say, it may be why we're here. Like if you believe, maybe you don't, it's okay. But if you do believe that you're here for a reason, if you believe that there's a design, if you believe that there's a purpose to you being born, seems pretty unlikely that you came here to never suffer,
Mhm.
right? That seems pretty improbable.
Mhm.
So the particular suffering that you have might be a key that unlocks your purpose. That very precise way in which you suffer, the attachments that you have that lead to suffering, the stuff you get het up about, angry about, emotional about, the
Mhm.
stuff that hurts you, that just hurts you, might not hurt other people, but it really stings for you.
Mhm.
Those are all signs of your design, right? And the design of your life. And those are all indications of your purpose. So maybe you should like lean into that.
Yeah.
And I think that, worry, people talk about worry a lot. That's just us trying to prepare for an uncertain future and feeling out of control. But control is the most important thing for the human mind, more important than obtaining pleasure and avoiding pain.
Mhm.
And years ago, and it's a great life lesson. Years ago, I was doing my driving test, and I was going a bit too quickly because the car behind me it felt like it was pushing up behind me. It was wanted to go faster, and it was a busy road, and I was going slower. And I said this to my driving instructor, and he said, "Oh, okay, I get it. Of course, there's a car behind you wants to get going, and you're going too slowly for them. Of course. Okay, I'd like you to come to a halt, please. Just where you are on the road. Don't pull in. Put your emergency lights on. Thank you. Put the handbrake on. Great. Parking brake. And turn off the engine. And I did. Middle of the road.
Yeah.
Busy street in the city. And he said, great. Thanks for that. How do you feel? And I said, I feel okay, actually. Yeah, I feel all right. He said, okay, is anybody beeping at you? Is anybody hustling you? Did anyone get out to shout at you? Is anything happening at all? No, everything's fine. Great. Thanks very much. Start the engine and turn off your emergency lights and let's continue on our journey. So that little lesson in driving and owning your space in the road taught me a massive life lesson. So that now to this day, if I ever feel overwhelmed by people need things, and I have effectively infinite emails now. It's effectively infinite. They're just too many all the time, and they're flagged, and I have to deal with them. And I know I'm not going to get to them all. And I have work to do to deliver, and keynotes to give, and travel, blah, 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 blah. And every now and then, I'll just close the laptop and go and look out of the window because I can. And this is one of the services I think of a mindfulness practice, great, or meditation. I've had a meditation practice for nearly 40 years now, and it's profoundly good for me. It really, really works. But even just mindful breathing for 2 minutes a day really helps you to remember most of what we do is made up. Most of it's made up. Kind of clothes we wear, the language we use, even the language we use. Speaking English.
Money
Made up. It's a barter system 2.0. We could be speaking another language. We could be using sign language. We could be upside down, hanging from swings in a school playground. Like it's all made up, all of it. The colors in our environment, everything is made up for a reason, right? It's not random. It's not chaos, but breathe. As long as you're breathing, you've still got stuff to do.
You mentioned a thought experiment that you can share with audience members, maybe to go deeper into accessing this sort of presence or creativity within themselves.
Yeah, I came up with this a few years ago, and it's really life-changing. I need to give it a name, like Shazam or something. I don't know. I need to give it a cool name. It's a very simple meditation practice, and it works like this. Most of the time, most people have a kind of running commentary in their heads that is critical. And not in all cultures, but particularly in the West. Our schooling, our education system places great emphasis on success and failure, grades, acceptable, unacceptable, conformity, and so on. So it works like this. You sit down somewhere comfortable where you know you definitely will not be disturbed. So imagine you're going to meditate. And you set an alarm, your phone is fine, watch, whatever, for 5 minutes. And before you begin, you say to your brain, for the next 5 minutes, you can say it out loud, you can say it internally, but it needs to be like an instruction. It needs to be like an intention that you set. You could have it written down and read it to yourself, as long as there's a clear intention. Or you could record your own voice saying the words, whatever you want, as long as it's a clear intention. You say to your brain, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to introspect. I'm going to examine myself. I'm going to look inward. And but until the timer goes off for this 5 minutes, I am not going to judge myself. I'm not going to disapprove or approve or like or dislike or reject or accept anything. Just for 5 minutes. And I trust you when the alarm goes off to get right back to self-judgment, opinions, right and wrong, like and don't like. Oh, I like this thing about myself. I don't like this thing about myself. I know you won't let me forget any of the, because you're keeping me safe,
Yeah.
right? You're keeping me safe by making sure I'm acutely aware of my failings and the things I'm doing wrong, and how I should be doing better. Although interestingly, that inner voice almost never gives a positive alternative.
Hmm.
Actually, that was one of the ways I shut up my inner monologue, was by saying, okay, then what should I do?
Right.
The inner monologue is usually like you're doing it wrong.
Don't do that.
Okay, if you're so smart, tell me what I should be doing.
Mhm.
Silence. So, so you have 5 minutes, and sometimes people find it helpful to visualize turning inside of yourself, like the spiritual selfness, the observer, as they say in Zen philosophy, or the real you. Imagine turning your conscious around inside and looking deep into yourself and just observe, just look.
Hmm.
And if you find yourself like maybe you have a social habit that you don't like, and you come across that in your inner thoughts, and you think, oh, it's so embarrassing that I do that thing. Like maybe when you're having a conversation with someone, you might be super aggressive in debating, and that means that you tend to win by aggression, not because you're right. And you might feel like, oh, I, that is a thing that I do.
Hmm.
No, no, no. Just remember, oh, hang on a second. This is the bit where I don't judge, I just observe. And then if you look at the why, so to take this made up example, you look at the why. So why am I aggressive in that way? You know, well, I think it's really important to be forthright about my position so that other people are clear about it. And also, I suppose if I'm confident that I'm right, I need to help them understand so that they can quickly get on with being right as well. And then, well, and then why is it my responsibility? Why? Eventually you'll end up with any behavior, any characteristic that you have, you will, I believe, end up with, because I feel it,
Mm.
root original motivator for any behavior, any characteristic, any aspect of yourself. You might look at physical aspects of yourself. Maybe there's an aspect of your body that you don't like. Maybe there's one that you do like. That's interesting. Why do I like that part of myself so much? Maybe you look in the mirror and you think, I have I think I have beautiful eyes.
Mhm.
Well, why do I think I have beautiful eyes? And why is that important to me?
Mm.
Why does it matter to me that my eyes are beautiful? Oh, well. And what you'll find when you get to the root of all of these aspects of yourself, shocking. I know this is shocking, but you're going to discover, everybody discovers, that you are a nice person. You're going to discover that you are nice. You're going to discover that you mean well.
Mhm.
You're going to discover that you intend to do things right. And you're going to discover that some of the solutions you've come to do things right, you were kind of winging it when you originally came up with that solution. Truth be told, you didn't really know if it would work. And it did seem to work. We're pattern finding primates, right? So it seemed to work. So you just kept doing it without questioning it. And maybe I should question that. Maybe there is another way.
Mm.
And then yourself.
Mhm.
Over the Gnostic temple entrance, it said, know thyself.
Mhm.
Know yourself. Now, the word know, interestingly, these days we use the word to mean to know the time, or know where you are, or know an address, to knowledge, gnosis. But actually, originally it meant to be one with.
Mm.
And when two people know each other, they are both changed by the knowing.
Mhm.
And so this type of meditation, 5 minutes a day for 5 days, it'll blow your mind. It'll change your life. And the alarm goes off. And you'll laugh. The alarm will go off, and you'll get right back to judging yourself. But you'll find that you have a couple less judgments this time, because you realize, hey, you know what? That thing that I didn't like about myself, I had a good reason for that. That was a good thing that I intended to do. And yeah, if I'm honest with myself, it doesn't really work. So, okay. But you realize that your motivation was good. I've been working on a set of theories for how to know if you're a goodie or a baddie. It's a surprisingly difficult thing to come up with a set of principles. But a couple I came up with was that it's necessary for you to believe that your intentions are good for you to be a good person. A lot of the time people don't know their own intentions. This introspection, 5 minutes a day for 5 days, you will very likely discover your motivations, and they're all, every single one of them, going to be revealed to be positive. Every single one. You might be a dude that you're out looking for fights at the weekend, and you know that you shouldn't, but you just love getting into fights, and you have a few drinks so that you're less self-conscious, and you go out to bars and you just try and cause trouble because you love having fights. And you might look at that and think, I'm just a terrible person. Go back, go back, look at the origin, look at why it was that you started doing that. Every time you will find that you have a positive reason. And once you identify that positive reason, it could be to feel safe by being more dangerous than the other people in the room. It could be another form of safety, to have social status, to have power. It's a form of safety. Uh, Ultimately, our decisions are motivated by love or fear, I believe. Our choices are always rooted in love or fear. And if you can work out that root emotion, that root need, which will always be positive, you might well find that you can invent another solution that doesn't involve punching people or aggressively arguing or dominating the space or being dismissive of people or judgmental or accusatory or insulting. Pick your behavior. But the flip side of that idea, that you have to know that your intentions are good, you have to know that you align with your own priorities, your own intentions, which a lot of people don't really think about. When you discover they're good, it's powerful. It gives you confidence, makes you feel calmer. You don't feel you have to justify or excuse as much. Well, you might have to explain in some circumstances. But if you are certain that your actions are good, if you cannot be corrected, if you take action and you refuse to be challenged because you're certain that your actions are good, you're probably a baddie.
Mm.
You must be ready. You must be humble about your certainty. You must be certain that you intend to do the right thing and open to discovering that it's not, so that you can change course and actually do the right thing. And so I'm still working on these theories, but that meditation practice, 5 minutes a day, tell your brain, just 5 minutes. I'll get right back to judging myself in 5 minutes, and just examine yourself. If you catch yourself having an opinion, and by that I mean approval or disapproval, liking or disliking, just remember the alarm hasn't gone off yet. I'll judge myself. Oh, I've got 3 more minutes. I'll judge myself in 3 minutes about that. It is a transformative exercise.
Fabulous. Wow. I am going to try that myself. Thank you for offering that up. So 5 days in a row, 5 minutes a day,
Yep.
doable. This has been such an incredible conversation, and I feel like I could keep talking to you for a while, but just for the spirit of today, there will be more in the future. And for today, I want to say thank you for joining, and you are offering a very generous gift for those listeners of Awaken. So tell us about the gift and how people can stay in touch with you.
Absolutely. So I founded a conference called the Creativity Conference, where we explore creative thinking, and we get some amazing speakers to talk about the principle of intentional decision making, creative thinking. It's free to attend. We always need more sponsors to make it free. We're hosting in New York in June, London in June this year, and in Dubai at the Museum of the Future in December, possibly also at Expo City. We'll see. We record the talks, and I've given you a link that should have a code embedded to give a year's free access to the library from our most recent conference. It's on Vimeo. It's described as, I think, 2 days and 9 hours of content, but that means 57 hours of content which is all extraordinary creative thinkers talking about ideation, realization, reflection. It's all practical, actionable, specific advice on how to make intentional decisions about the future of your reality. And I hope people find the ideas helpful in that content.
Fabulous.
Oh, and to find me, I'm really easy to find.
Okay.
I'm what they call a Google whack. There's only one person in the world with this name. So if you search for me, you'll find me, Maxim Jago, Jago. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm about to start a TikTok channel. I'm not on TikTok yet, but I will be. I'm on X, Facebook, you name it. LinkedIn's a good place. I tend to post talks on LinkedIn. That can be quite helpful for people. So I'm easy to find, and I always need new dad jokes. So if anybody wants to reach out and dad jokes and recipes, send them my way.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again for being part of Awaken and sharing this creativity conference information and amazing content with people. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for tuning in to this amazing interview as part of our Awaken series. I hope you found value. Check out the rest of the interviews on Awaken. Keep tuning in and please subscribe to Paradigm Expansions to stay in touch, where we are doing more events like this, and we are all about dropping in to your heart, to your true self, to really, truly love your life. Thank you for joining. See you on the next video.